Floyd Collins Incident. In late December 1924, Floyd Collins discovered a cave called Sand Cave, which was easily accessible to tourists because it was near a highway. He quickly struck a deal with the land's owners to receive 50% of any profits from the cave's exploration. Afterward, he immediately began working there. Since there was no significant entrance, however, many tourists avoided it. As a result, Floyd spent hours every day over the next few weeks digging deeper and deeper. On January 30th, 1925, it was snowing outside, and once again, Floyd went into the cave, only to find something shocking. Crawling forward with a lantern, he reached what was known as the turnaround room, called that way because many cavers would stop there and turn around, deeming it too risky to continue. The only way to go farther was through a tiny narrow hole called the squeeze, which measured only 9 inches in height. Floyd, however, managed to push through. Beyond the squeeze, he saw a narrow pit dropping about 10 feet. He went down feet first and reached the bottom, where he found yet another pit. Squatting down, he removed the remaining rocks and debris and finally saw an opening into the main cave. He tied a rope in place and descended an 80-foot drop. Reaching the cavern floor, he was amazed by the sight, but noticed his light was starting to dim. Wanting to avoid being left in the dark, he climbed back up the 80-foot drop and began returning, moving backwards and pushing his lantern with his shoulder. Unfortunately, his lantern slipped into a tiny hole and shattered, leaving him in total darkness. Because the cavern was extremely unstable, Floyd knew he had to move carefully to avoid dislodging loose rocks. Unable to see, however, he kicked one loose, and it fell onto his left leg, trapping him. He tried freeing himself with his right leg, but the more he moved, the more rocks tumbled down, further wedging him in place. It was 10 a.m., and he began shouting for help, hoping someone would hear him. He remained there all day, and by 9 a.m. the next morning, nearly 24 hours after he had become trapped, 2 of the cave's owners arrived with their 17-year-old son, Jewel Estes, to check on him. They saw Floyd's coat hanging outside the cave and called his name, but no one answered, so they ventured deeper. Before long, the 2 owners turned back because the passages were too tight, but Jewel continued and eventually found Floyd, who asked him to call his brothers for help. Soon, Marshall Collins, Floyd's brother, and Lee Collins, Floyd's father, reached the entrance, finding a growing crowd watching the rescue attempt. Marshall and another man went inside to widen the passage, digging carefully so as not to send loose rocks tumbling onto Floyd. At 4 p.m., Floyd's other brother Homer arrived. Floyd had previously asked Homer to come along that day, so Homer felt guilty for refusing and did his best to help. He did reach Floyd, but a new problem emerged. The crowds outside had started multiple bonfires. The melting ice funneled water into the cave, creating mud and sending freezing cold water down toward Floyd. After 8 hours with Floyd, his brothers had to rest. Upon emerging, Homer grew furious at the huge crowd, telling people to leave if they couldn't help. However, none of them listened. Reporters began arriving, hoping to interview Homer. Tired of the questions, he told them to see for themselves inside the cave. Confusion and rumors spread. Some claimed Floyd was already dead or that the cave had collapsed entirely. Determined to prove otherwise, Marshall offered a $500,000 reward to anyone who saved his brother. As rumors spread more, however, he went in to check on Floyd himself and found him alive. Floyd managed to free one hand, suggesting they tie a rope around his chest to pull him out, but as soon as they tried, he begged them to stop, saying he felt like he was being pulled in two. Homer worked continuously, removing dirt and debris until he was utterly exhausted and needed medical attention. By Tuesday night, 95 hours after Floyd had become trapped, a reporter named Skeets entered the cave and installed a light bulb near Floyd. While removing rubble, Skeets exposed more of Floyd's legs, but still couldn't free him. His story and interview with Floyd were published, drawing even larger crowds. Hotels nearby were filled, and at least 1,000 people gathered around Sand Cave. All this activity further weakened the cave walls, putting it at risk of collapse, though nobody realized it at the time, as everyone was rooting for Floyd. At hour 123, the entrance to the pit collapsed, blocking any access to Floyd and cutting off deliveries of food and water. By hour 144, a team of workers formed to dig a new tunnel to reach him. The only way they could know if Floyd was still alive was the light bulb Skeets had installed. It was connected to another bulb outside, which would flicker when Floyd breathed. They dug relentlessly, but with no food or water reaching Floyd, combined with the cold temperature, his chances were fading quickly. By Friday, February 13th, the men had nearly reached him, and one worker reported hearing groaning about 10 feet away. However, at 1:30 a.m. on February 16th, a worker reached Floyd and found him already deceased. Initially, Floyd's body was left in the cave. After some time, though, his brother Homer arranged for its removal and gave him a proper burial.